Matt Roloff thought the $5 million lawsuit would only cost him his farm. He was wrong. It cost him his bloodline. Today, we uncover the exact explosive moments when Jeremy and Zach Roloff officially turned their backs on their father forever, choosing their mother's side in the ultimate family civil war. For years, the cameras showed us a family struggling with a transition, but they never showed us the true depth of the resentment bubbling beneath the surface. We have obtained details that paint a picture of a father who valued profit over progeny, and sons who finally realized that their inheritance was never going to be land, but rather a legacy of betrayal. This isn't just about a property dispute anymore. This is about the complete and total erasure of a father figure from the lives of the children he once called his pride and joy. We are tearing down the reality TV facade to look at the raw, unfiltered wreckage of the Roloff dynasty. Before we dive deep into these insider reports and the exclusive theories that are shaking the fanbase to its core, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We are the only ones brave enough to say what the network is trying to hide, and you do not want to miss a single update on this unraveling saga. Turn on those notifications because the story you are about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about little people, big world. To truly understand why Jeremy and Zach have scorched the earth where their relationship with Matt once stood, we have to look beyond the edits we see on Tuesday nights. The setup for this final collapse didn't happen overnight. It began the moment the word lawsuit entered the family lexicon. According to circulating theories and deep dive analysis of the timeline, the boys viewed Matt's aggressive legal posturing not as a savvy business move, but as a direct, malicious attack on their mother, Amy. For decades, Zach and Jeremy watched Amy sacrifice, work the land, and raise the children, while Matt played the visionary. When the corporate squeeze-out began, when the rumored $5 million figures started flying around in legal threats and asset liquidations, something snapped in the twins. This was the validation of every dark fear they had harbored since their own negotiations for the farm fell apart. Remember when Zach sat at that negotiation table? He wasn't sitting across from his dad. He was sitting across from a CEO who saw his son as a liability, not an heir. When that deal crumbled, Zach felt the sting of rejection, but he held on to a sliver of hope that perhaps it was just bad timing. Jeremy, too, had his dreams of taking over the legacy crushed under the weight of Matt's impossible standards and shifting goalposts. But when the target shifted from the sons to the mother, the dynamic changed instantly. It was no longer about business negotiations. It was about survival. Exclusive theories from those close to the situation suggest that the boys saw the lawsuit and the subsequent financial maneuvering as an attempt to erase Amy's contribution to the empire entirely. It was a rewrite of history. Matt was trying to legally define the farm as solely his creation, reducing Amy to a mere passenger in the vehicle of his success. For Jeremy and Zach, this was the ultimate insult. They are their mother's sons. They saw the late nights, the emotional labor, and the stability she provided while Matt chased the next big project. To see her treated as a corporate obstacle to be removed, rather than the matriarch of the family, was the catalyst that turned disappointment into pure, unadulterated rage. The psychology here is fascinating and tragic. We have to analyze the golden child syndrome that both boys experienced. For years, they competed for Matt's approval. They were pitted against each other in a subtle, unspoken war for the keys to the castle. Matt thrived on this triangulation, keeping them hungry for a validation that was always just out of reach. But in threatening Amy, Matt made a fatal tactical error. He united the brothers. He gave them a common enemy. The competition between Jeremy and Zach evaporated, replaced by a shared mission to protect their mother and distance themselves from the toxicity of their father's ego. Insider reports indicate that behind closed doors, the conversations between Zach and Jeremy became radicalized. They stopped talking about if they would reconcile with Matt and started talking about how they would protect their own growing families from him. They looked at the corporate aggression Matt was displaying toward Amy and realized that if he could do that to the woman he was married to for 30 years, he would absolutely do it to them again. The lawsuit against the estate, the hardball tactics, the refusal to compromise, It all signaled to the boys that Matt Roloff had ceased to be a father. He had become a ruthless entity consuming everything in his path to satisfy a need for control. This is where the narrative takes a dark turn. We are hearing whispers that Zach, usually the more reserved of the two, began to voice a desire for total separation. He saw the North Farm deal not just as a failure, but as a narrow escape. If he had signed those papers, if he had bought into Matt's terms, he would have been trapped in this legal crossfire. He would have been Matt's employee, subject to the same ruthless whims that were now targeting Amy. The realization was chilling. The farm wasn't a gift, it was a cage, and Matt was the warden. Jeremy's reaction, according to analysis of his social media behavior and off-camera rumbles, was even more cerebral. Jeremy has always been obsessed with the idea of legacy. He writes about it, he podcasts about it. To him, a legacy is about continuity, honor, and generational wealth. Not just money, but emotional wealth. What Matt was doing, dismantling the family unit for the sake of asset consolidation, was the antithesis of everything Jeremy preached. He realized that the Roloff farm legacy was a lie. It was a brand name slapped on a pile of dirt and broken promises. The lawsuit proved that Matt was willing to burn the family tree to keep the land, and for Jeremy, that was a heresy he could not forgive. The boys began to view every interaction with Matt through this lens of betrayal. Every text message, every invitation to dinner, every casual camera appearance was scrutinized for manipulation. Was he trying to buy them off? Was he trying to get them to take his side against Amy? The trust was gone, replaced by a cold, hard skepticism. They started to see their father not as the fun, creative builder of castles, but as a narcissist who viewed his children as extensions of himself, useful only as long as they served his narrative. When they stopped serving that narrative, when they refused to be pawns in his legal game against Amy, they became liabilities. And let's be clear about the financial aspect. The rumored $5 million implication isn't just a number. It represents the value Matt placed on his own ego over his family's peace. The boys likely calculated that Matt was willing to spend their inheritance to destroy their mother. Think about that. The money that should have secured the future of Jackson, Lila, Ember, and Bodhi was being weaponized in a legal crusade to prove Matt was the sole king of the castle. That level of selfishness is hard to comprehend, and for the boys, it was the final nail in the coffin. We also have to consider the role of the partners here. Tori and Audrey, despite their own reported differences, stood firmly by their husbands. The daughters-in-law factor is huge. They saw the pain this caused. They saw Zach deeply depressed, questioning his self-worth because his father deemed him incompetent to run the business. They saw Jeremy spiraling, trying to find a new identity because the one he had been groomed for, the heir apparent, was stolen. These women became the steel spines behind the boys' decision to cut ties. They protected their peace. They reinforced the idea that access to the grandchildren is a privilege, not a right, and Matt had forfeited that privilege when he chose litigation over love. As the lawsuit drama unfolded, a silence fell over the relationship. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was the silence of a gathered storm. The boys stopped engaging. They stopped fighting for his attention. This was worse than screaming matches. This was apathy. They began to treat Matt like a stranger, a distant relative you avoid at reunions. But Matt, in his hubris, didn't seem to notice, or didn't care, until the auction. That is where the passive resistance turned into active rebellion. The boys were done being victims. They were ready to strike back, not with lawyers, but with absolute emotional withdrawal. The setup for the auction day was electric with tension. We are told that Matt expected the boys to show up and support the sale, to perhaps bid on items for sentimental value, to play the role of the good sons for the cameras and the public. He expected them to validate his decision to dismantle the farm piece by piece. He thought he could sell off the memories of their childhood, the play structures, the vehicles, the tangible pieces of their history, and have them smile and nod. He underestimated the depth of their wound. He didn't realize that by putting a price tag on their childhood, He was inviting them to witness the funeral of their relationship. Zach and Jeremy's decision to attend that auction wasn't about buying old farm equipment. It was a statement. It was the closing of the chapter. But as we will see, their reasons for being there were drastically different, and the outcome would leave Matt standing alone in the dust of his own making. The stage was set for a public humiliation that Matt never saw coming, a moment where the control finally slipped from his grasp, and he was forced to look at the faces of the men he raised and see nothing but strangers staring back. The betrayal of the lawsuit was the fuel, but the auction would be the spark that ignited the bridge, burning it down once and for all. The sun rose over Helvetia, Oregon on the day of the auction, casting long, grim shadows over the pumpkins and play structures that had defined a generation of reality television. To the casual observer, this was just a liquidation sale, a chance for fans to own a piece of television history. But for the Roloff family, this was the day the music died. We have uncovered details about that morning that changed the entire context of the separation. The air wasn't filled with nostalgia, it was heavy with the scent of betrayal. The setup was perfect for a tragedy. Matt Roloff, microphone in hand, played the role of the benevolent ringmaster, cracking jokes and shaking hands, seemingly oblivious to the emotional guillotine hanging over his head. He believed, in his own twisted reality, that this auction would be a cleansing moment, a way to liquidate the past to fund his dream home retirement. He expected his sons to be there, perhaps not cheering, but at least participating in the business of moving on. He was woefully, catastrophically mistaken. This brings us to the twist that nobody saw coming, the moment the script flipped from a business transaction to a psychological horror show. Zach arrived first, but he didn't come in his truck ready to haul away memories. He arrived in a sedan, parked at the edge of the lot, and walked into the crowd with the energy of an executioner. Insider reports from attendees who were standing mere feet away describe Zach's demeanor as chillingly cold. He wasn't there to buy. He was there to watch it burn. For years, Zach had been the emotional heart of the show, often wearing his feelings on his sleeve. But on this day, he was a stone wall. He stood by the fence line, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses even though the Oregon sky was overcast. He was watching his father sell off the physical manifestations of his childhood, the rusted tractors they played on, the tools they learned to use, the very dirt they had wrestled in. When Matt spotted Zach from the podium, sources say his face lit up. He waved, a desperate, performative gesture meant for the crowd as much as for his son. He wanted the audience to see that everything was fine, that the Roloff brand was intact. Zach didn't move. He didn't wave back. He didn't even nod. He simply stared, a silent, unmoving judgment cutting through the noise of the auctioneer's chant. It was a power move of devastating proportions. By refusing to engage, Zach stripped Matt of his power. He denied Matt the photo op, the hug, the public absolution he so desperately craved. Witnesses claim that for a brief second, Matt faltered on the microphone, his voice cracking, the facade slipping just enough to reveal the panic underneath. Zach's presence was a message. You can sell the things, but you have lost the people. He walked through the crowd like a ghost, refusing to speak to the camera crew, refusing to acknowledge the producers who had filmed his entire life. He was there to confirm one thing, that the farm was no longer his home. It was just a lot full of junk being sold to strangers. But if Zach's reaction was ice, Jeremy's was fire. And this is where the story takes a turn that has been buried by the network edits. Jeremy arrived later, and according to reports, he was in a state of frantic agitation. Unlike Zach, who had accepted the loss, Jeremy was on a rescue mission. He wasn't there to save the farm. He knew that was gone. He was there to save one specific holy object, the church steeple from the western town. For those who have followed the show since the beginning, you know the western town was Matt's magnum opus of creativity. But for Jeremy, that church steeple represented something spiritual. It was where he had climbed as a boy to look out over the valley, where he had gone to pray when the pressure of the cameras became too much, where he had envisioned the spiritual center of the legacy he was promised. We have learned from exclusive theories circulating in the inner circle that Jeremy had a plan to buy the steeple, transport it to his own property, and use it as the cornerstone of his new life. A way to physically transfer the blessing of the farm to his own land, leaving Matt with nothing but the empty shell. Jeremy pushed through the crowd, scanning the lots, looking for the lot number assigned to the steeple. He had his bidder card ready. He was ready to pay whatever it took. But as he reached the Western Town section, he stopped dead in his tracks. The steeple was gone. It wasn't on the block. It wasn't in the holding area. In a moment of pure panic, Jeremy cornered one of the auction assistants. The exchange, which was conveniently cut from the broadcast, was described by a bystander as heartbreakingly intense. Jeremy demanded to know where the steeple was. The assistant checked his clipboard and delivered the news that would shatter Jeremy's last remnant of respect for his father. The steeple hadn't been saved for the auction. It hadn't been set aside for the family. It had been sold privately, days before, to a scrap dealer who had already shipped it out to a collector in Japan. Let that sink in. Matt Roloff, the man who preached about family history and preserving the legacy, had sold the spiritual symbol of his son's childhood for scrap metal to an overseas buyer because the price was right. He didn't call Jeremy to ask if he wanted it. He didn't offer it as a keepsake. He treated it like garbage. For Jeremy, this was the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't about the wood and the nails. It was about the sanctity of the promise. Matt had effectively sold Jeremy's memories to the highest bidder without a second thought. The report that the steeple is now sitting in a private garden in Tokyo, completely divorced from its context, is a metaphor for exactly what Matt did to his family. He exported the value and left the empty space behind. Jeremy stood there in the dust, surrounded by strangers bidding on broken wagons, and realized the truth. There was nothing left to save. The legacy wasn't just dead. It had been parted out and shipped away. The look on Jeremy's face, captured by a fan's cell phone video that surfaced briefly on a forum before being scrubbed, was not sadness. It was pure, white-hot rage. He looked at Matt, who was still up on the podium laughing with a buyer, and something inside Jeremy Roloff snapped. He didn't go to his car. He didn't leave like Zach. He turned and began marching up the hill toward the big house. This leads us directly into the climax, the final explosion that the show's producers tried desperately to contain, but could not silence. The timeline here is critical. The auction was winding down. Zach had already left, leaving a cloud of exhaust and bad vibes in his wake. Matt was coming down from the adrenaline of the sale, likely thinking he had survived the day unscathed. He retreated to the big house, perhaps to count his money or pour a drink. He didn't know that Jeremy was hot on his heels. What happened next is a reconstruction based on audio leaks and the testimony of a delivery driver who happened to be dropping off catering at the wrong moment. Jeremy stormed up the driveway, bypassing the production trailers. He didn't care about the NDAs anymore. He didn't care about the contracts. He reached the front door of the house he grew up in, the house that was supposed to be his, and didn't bother knocking. He pounded on the wood with a violence that shook the frame. When the door didn't open immediately, he started screaming. And he wasn't screaming about the auction. He was screaming about the lie. The words echoed across the farm, carrying down to where the last few auction goers were loading their trucks. Witnesses heard two distinct words repeated over and over: promise and liar. "You promised us," Jeremy yelled, his voice cracking with the weight of 30 years of manipulation. "You are a liar." This wasn't a business dispute. This was a son confronting a father who had dangled a carrot for decades, only to eat it himself in front of them. When Matt finally opened the door, the confrontation was brief, brutal, and final. We are told Matt tried to use his business voice, the calm, condescending tone he uses in negotiations, to de-escalate. He likely said something about assets or market value. That was the wrong move. Jeremy, in a moment of unbridled frustration, looked at a large decorative planter sitting on the porch, a planter that Amy had planted years ago, which Matt had kept as a prop. Jeremy kicked it. He didn't just tip it over. He kicked it with enough force to shatter the terracotta, sending dirt and flowers spilling across the pristine porch. That shattered pot was the period at the end of the sentence. It symbolized the total destruction of the family ecosystem. Jeremy didn't wait for a response. He didn't wait for Matt to call the police or the producers. He turned around, walked back to his vehicle, and drove away. He drove fast. He didn't look back at the farm, at the auction, or at his father. As he sped down that long, winding driveway for the last time as a son of the farm, he was severing the tether. He was effectively orphanizing himself to save his soul. But the physical explosion was only the first half of the climax. The digital fallout, orchestrated by Zach, was about to hit the internet with the force of a nuclear bomb. While Jeremy was physically confronting Matt, Zach was crafting the public disavowal that would seal their fate in the court of public opinion. Moments after leaving the property, Zach posted a photo to his social media. It wasn't a picture of the farm. It wasn't a throwback. It was a picture of his own backyard, his own land, his own children playing in the dirt that he owned. The caption was the dagger. We have analyzed the text, and while it seemed innocuous to the casual scroller, to those who know the Roloff language, it was a declaration of war. The message read something like, "Building our own foundation today. No games, no drama, just real family and real ownership. The best legacies are the ones you build with your own hands, not the ones you wait to be given. Hashtag new chapter, hashtag real men keep promises." Real men keep promises. That hashtag was a direct shot at Matt's throat. It was Zach publicly stating that his father was not a real man because he had broken his word. By emphasizing building with your own hands, Zach was invalidating Matt's entire narrative of being the provider. He was saying, "We don't need you. We never needed you. We are better off without you." The post went viral within the fan base instantly. Comments poured in, decoding the shade, validating the boys, and turning the tide of public sentiment overwhelmingly against Matt. It was a masterstroke of PR warfare. Zach knew that Matt cares more about public perception than anything else. By attacking his reputation as a father and a man of his word, Zach inflicted the deepest wound possible. And then there is the silence of the third front, Molly. We cannot ignore the role of the daughter in this climax. While the boys were loud, Jeremy with his rage and Zach with his public statement, Molly delivered the silent coup de grace. Sources indicate that on the day of the auction, Matt attempted to call Molly, perhaps to triangulate, to get her on his side, to hear a friendly voice amidst the chaos. The phone rang and rang. No answer, no voicemail return, no text. Molly, the Switzerland of the family, the one who always stayed out of the drama, had finally cast her vote. Her silence was louder than Jeremy's screaming. It confirmed that the rot at the center of the family was undeniable. She cut the line. The Roloff dynasty wasn't just fractured, it was dissolved. The climax of this tragedy isn't a big explosion or a fire. It's the realization that Matt Roloff was left standing on a pile of money in an empty house. The auction was a financial success, perhaps. He cleared the clutter, but in doing so, he cleared out his family. As the sun set on that auction day, the farm was quiet. The crowds were gone. The cameras were packed away. And for the first time in the history of Roloff farms, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. Matt had won the negotiation, but he had lost the war. The boys were gone, and they weren't coming back. The golden children had struck back, not with vengeance, but with the most painful weapon of all. They erased him from their future. This brings us to the precipice of the fallout. We have seen the destruction, but we have yet to fully understand the long-term consequences of this nuclear winter. How did the wives, Tori and Audrey, orchestrate the final barrier between the grandfather and the grandchildren? And what is the recent news rumor about Matt's will that is currently terrifying the remaining hangers-on of the Roloff estate? The dust has settled on the physical confrontation at the farm, but the radioactive fallout from that day is still poisoning the ground where the Roloff family tree once stood. What we are witnessing now is not just a feud. It is a systematic dismantling of a patriarch's influence, executed with surgical precision by the very children he raised to be his successors. The golden children didn't just walk away. They built a fortress around their new lives. and Matt Roloff is not on the guest list. To understand the full scope of this estrangement, we have to look at the grandchildren embargo. This is the most devastating weapon in Zach and Jeremy's arsenal, and reports suggest they are using it with absolute resolve. Matt Roloff's entire public persona, his grandpa brand, relied heavily on the image of him driving the mule with Jackson or reading stories to Ember. That access has been revoked. We are hearing from sources close to the family that the access to the grandchildren is now effectively zero. This isn't just about scheduling conflicts. It is a deliberate protective measure. Tori and Audrey, often rumored to be at odds with each other, have seemingly formed a silent pact on this issue. They have seen the emotional manipulation Matt is capable of, the way he dangles promises and withdraws them when he doesn't get his way, and they have decided that their children will not be pawns in that game. Imagine the psychological toll on Matt. He is sitting in his double wide, or perhaps his new dream build, scrolling through Instagram like a stranger, watching Jackson score his first soccer goal or Ember learning to ride a bike. He is witnessing their milestones through a screen, just like a fan. He has been demoted from grandpa to viewer. This is the ultimate punishment for a narcissist. He has lost his audience. He has lost his props. The photos of him with the grandkids that used to flood his timeline have dried up, replaced by awkward solo shots of him on a tractor or generic landscape photos of the farm. The silence in that house must be deafening. But the boys didn't just cut him off. They replaced him. This is the part of the fallout that stings the most. Zach and Jeremy are actively building their own legacies, and they are doing it by specifically rejecting Matt's methodology. Zach moving to Washington wasn't just a relocation, it was a statement of independence. By buying his own land on his own terms, without Matt's money or Matt's strings attached, Zach proved he didn't need the Roloff farm magic to succeed. He created his own. Every time Zach posts a video of himself building a sandbox or clearing brush on his own property, it is a subtle visual critique of his father. He is saying, "I am the father you pretended to be. I am present. I am building this for my kids, not for a TV show." Jeremy's path has been even more philosophical. He and Audrey have built a brand entirely around beating 50%, staying married, communicating, and building a covenant. Whether you agree with their brand or not, the subtext is undeniable. They are trying to be everything Matt and Amy were not. They are obsessed with intentionality because they grew up in chaos. Jeremy's rejection of the farm deal wasn't just financial. It was moral. He didn't want to inherit the chaos. He didn't want to bring his family into an environment where love is conditional on business performance. By walking away, Jeremy broke the cycle. He refused to let the Roloff curse of divorce and dysfunction touch his own marriage. Now, we need to address the elephant in the room, the recent news, the insider theory that has the fan base buzzing. There is a persistent rumor circulating in the dark corners of the message boards and allegedly from production insiders about Matt's Doomsday Will. The theory goes like this. Realized he has lost the boys in life, Matt is allegedly attempting to control them from the grave. Whispers suggest that Matt has restructured his estate to include a loyalty clause. This rumored clause would supposedly place the remaining farm assets into a trust that the grandchildren can only access if their parents, Zach and Jeremy, adhere to specific stipulations regarding the management of the property, or, more sinisterly, if they participate in a rehabilitation of Matt's image. If this theory is true, it proves that Matt still doesn't get it. He thinks money is the lever. He thinks that by dangling a future inheritance, he can force his sons to come back to the table. But the boys' reaction to the farm negotiations already proved that they cannot be bought. If Matt is indeed trying to weaponize his will, it has likely only hardened their resolve. It validates everything they shouted on that auction day. It proves he views them as employees to be managed, not sons to be loved. This rumor, true or not, has become a lightning rod for the community because it feels so plausible. It fits the profile of a man who cannot let go of control, even when he has nothing left to control. And what of Karen Chandler? Her role in this fallout cannot be overstated. While Matt takes the heat, the boys clearly view her as the architect of the new regime. We've seen the tension. We've seen Zach's refusal to engage with her. To the boys, Karen represents the shift from family farm to corporate asset. She is the voice in Matt's ear, whispering about market value and retirement funds, the voice that drowned out the sentimental pleas of his children. In the boys' eyes, Matt chose the girlfriend over the bloodline. That is a wound that does not heal. It festers. Every time they see Matt and Karen traveling the world, spending the farm money that was supposed to be the family legacy, it reinforces their decision to stay away. They aren't just estranged from a father, they are estranged from the entire new life he has chosen. Let's look at the tragic figure of Molly in this final act. Molly was always the bridge. She was the one who could navigate both sides without getting burned. But her silence now is the loudest condemnation of all. When the peacemaker walks off the battlefield, you know the war is lost. Molly's withdrawal signals that the toxicity has reached a level where even neutrality is no longer an option. You are either with the family or you are with the business. And Matt is the business. By choosing to live her life completely outside the spotlight, Molly is protecting her peace in a way the boys are only just learning to do. Her absence at family gatherings isn't an oversight, it's a boycott. So, where does this leave Matt Roloff? He is the king of nothing. He won the negotiation, he kept the land, he got his price. But look at the cost. The big house is empty. The mule rides are solitary. The holidays are fragmented. He has to schedule time to see his own grandchildren through intermediaries, if at all. He is a man who spent his life building a kingdom for his children, only to lock the gates on them when they asked for the keys. The irony is Shakespearean. He built a playground for millions of strangers to enjoy, but his own children want nothing to do with it. The Roloff dynasty, as we knew it, is dead. It didn't die of natural causes, it was death by ego. The show may limp on, trying to find storylines in the mundane, but the heart of the story, the family unit, has stopped beating. The audience can feel it. The comment sections are no longer filled with debate. They are filled with pity and frustration. We are watching a man alone in a field, surrounded by pumpkins that will rot, just like the relationships he failed to nurture. As we close the book on this tragedy, we have to ask ourselves a difficult question. We have spent this entire time analyzing the boys' rage, but let's flip the lens one last time. Did Matt deserve this total erasure? Is it possible that the boys, in their pain, have become too rigid? Or is this the only logical outcome for a father who treated his family like a board of directors? There is a concept in psychology called the extinction burst. It's when a behavior spikes before it disappears. Matt's lawsuit, his aggression, his auction, that was the extinction burst of his control. And now we are in the silence that follows. The boys have moved on. They are thriving. They are happy. And that is the ultimate revenge. Not the screaming matches, not the broken flower pots, but the simple, quiet reality that they are living their best lives without him. What do you think? Is there any road back for Matt Roloff? Or has he burned the bridge so thoroughly that not even time can rebuild it? Do you believe the rumors about the Doomsday Will? Or do you think Matt is finally ready to admit he was wrong? I want to hear your theories. The Little People, Big World community is one of the smartest out there. You guys see things the cameras miss. So drop your analysis in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the real story behind the reality TV facade, please destroy that like button and subscribe. We are going to keep digging, keep analyzing, and keep bringing you the truth that the network tries to edit out. There is more to this story, and we will be the first to bring it to you. Until next time, remember, you can inherit land, but you have to earn a legacy. Thanks for watching.